The UFC is back this week from Vegas, and in the main event, we have got a top 6 featherweight matchup between Calvin Kattar and Arnold Allen in the featherweight division. Now with the featherweight champion likely moving up to 155 pounds to take on the new champion, Islam Makhachev, in February. It kind of leaves the featherweight division in an interesting spot because there won't be an interim championship fight, but you got a lot of moving pieces, and you can only assume with this fight, and probably, I would think, a number one contenders fight or a title eliminator between Yair Rodriguez and Josh Emmett coming up. There's going to be a lot of big moving pieces in this UFC's featherweight division, but of course the main event, Calvin Kattar, Arnold Allen. The rest of the card is mid. It's not great. So it's top heavy, and it features this main event. And also we're gonna have 2 more predictions videos coming out probably tomorrow. Now one of them is gonna be a boxing fight. It's Jake Paul, Anderson Silva, and you know, normally I wouldn't break down a Jake Paul fight, but this one I feel like is really important because Anderson Silva is one of my favorite fighters of all time, and I do not want to see him get knocked out by Jake Paul, and I don't think it's going to happen, but we'll get to that prediction when we get to it tomorrow. And also Bellator 287 from Italy coming at you. We're going to have that predictions video coming out on Monday as well, so be on the lookout for both those videos. And folks, if you haven't not yet, make sure that subscribe button down below for some more MMA here on the channel. So for now, we're down to 10 fights in this card because Cody Durden and Clayton Rodriguez just got canceled. I think Durden's going to stay on the card. He'll likely take on a guy probably lost in the contender series or something like that coming up. But yeah, Rodriguez is out. So we're down for now to 10 fights. I thought Marco Madsen and Grant Dawson was going to be on that card, but I think that's coming up next week instead on that Amanda Lemos and Marina Rodriguez fight card. So yeah, we're down to 10 fights, and our first fight will be Christian Rodriguez taking on Garrett Armfield. 2 guys looking for their first win in the UFC, and for Garrett Armfield, came into the promotion 3 months ago, losing to David Onama. It was a fight where Armfield is a plus 550 underdog in because, I mean, for good reason. David Onama is a monster in there, and of course Onama lost his next fight in the UFC, but still Onama went in there, took care of business, did what he was supposed to do to Garrett Armfield in that fight, got him to the ground, submitted him with an arm triangle. It was one-way traffic for David Onama. He did what he was supposed to do as a minus 600 favorite going into that fight. And for Garrett Armfield before that, you know, his record outside the UFC was a little bit questionable because he really hadn't taken on anyone all that great, and the decent competition he had fought weren't the greatest, victories. Now, his best win did come in FAC 13, winning the Bantamweight Championship over there in that promotion. He beat Stephen Graham by a 30-second TKO finish in that fight, and before that, he fought in Shamrock FC. Had 2 fights over there, won his second one by split decision against a guy who was 6-3, and then beat a fighter who was making his second walk to a professional MMA cage in the fight before that. Armfield fought in CFFC. He lost fight over there, lost by rear naked choke. He went 1-1 over there, beat Kenny Richmond as well. But yeah, Armfield's interesting. I mean, the guy's got a decent stand-up game. He's got a lot of power for his size, I would say. But he's pretty young in his career too. He's only 26 years old. He can wrestle too, and he needs to go to it as well. But again, just a guy who's kind of young so far in his MMA career, and he's taken on Christian Rodriguez, who came into the promotion his last fight, losing to Jonathan Pierce. JSP beat him by unanimous decision. And Rodriguez fought in the Contender Series. He didn't get his contract through winning on the Contender Series. He beat Junior Cortez by unanimous decision. It was a pretty one-sided beatdown for Rodriguez, at least on the feet, but on the ground, it was Cortez having some success down there. And that's really how Christian Rodriguez lost his last fight to Jonathan Pierce in his only fight so far in the UFC. Pierce was so able to get takedowns on Christian Rodriguez. You got 11 minutes of control time for Pierce in that fight. And now in that, matchup, Rodriguez did see some success in the feet, and that's how he did steal a round against Pierce in that fight, even though in that second round, Pierce had 3 minutes control time on the ground. It was the damage that Rodriguez was able to put on Pierce in that second that was able to win him that round and get to the third round, make it 1-1. Of course, Pierce, though, outgrinded him to that third round, getting the decision 2-1. But Rodriguez's stand-up game in that fight showed you a little bit of something out of him. We'll see what happens, though, because, again, GSP had a lot of success on the ground against him. Reyes Cortez had some success against Rodriguez on the ground as well. We'll see what Garrett Armfield's able to offer because, Armfield's ground game isn't horrible, but is it to the point where he can take down Rodriguez and hold down Rodriguez? That's a question in its own right, because on the feet, I do like Christian Rodriguez. I think Rodriguez is faster than Armfield. I think he'll be able to beat Armfield with a punch a lot of times in this fight. And you got 2 guys who are fairly young, really just in their MMA careers and just in general. I mean, 2 younger bantamweights. You got Rodriguez, who's 24 years old. You got Armfield, who's 26. 2 guys, again, looking to get that first win in the UFC. But when I go to my point where I made earlier about Rodriguez being a lot faster on the feet, I think that's going to really play into his hands in this fight. I think that's how Rodriguez is going to beat Garrett Armfield. I think he'll be able to keep the fight standing. I think, again, Rodriguez will be able to beat Armfield to the punch, and that's why I'm going to take C-Rod, Christian Rodriguez, to win this fight by unanimous decision. And next up, we've got the return of Chase Hooper. He'll be taking on Steve Garcia, and for Hooper, his last fight looked really good, man. I mean, you know, he beat the brakes off of Felipe Colares in his last fight. Now is Colares the most skillful guy that the UFC has got? I mean, he's not, but he was coming off a split decision loss to Chris Gutierrez, and Gutierrez is not horrible at all. Gutierrez is going to be taking on Frankie Edgar next month in Frankie Edgar's final fight ever, and a lot of people are taking Chris Gutierrez to win that fight. We'll get to that fight when we get to it in 3 weeks' time, but Chase Hooper goes in there, he beats Felipe Colares, he beats the brakes off him in the first round. It's dominant wrestling. Second round, more transitional work and more scrambles in that second round, but Hooper's winning in the third round. Chase Hooper puts it on Felipe Colares, using the wrestling, using his jiu-jitsu, using his strikes. Hooper looked really good in that fight against Colares. And he was coming off that loss to Stephen Ocho Peterson. I feel like it's every time Chase Hooper loses a fight in the UFC, everyone's quick to bash him and about how young he is and how he's not ready for the UFC. And I'll be honest with you, I've been one of those people too. Because when you think about it, the guy's only 23 years old. We just talked about in the last fight about how young Christian Rodriguez is and how young Garrett Armfield is. Well, both those guys are older than Chase Hooper. And Chase Hooper's been in the UFC for what, 3 years? And Gutierrez and Rodriguez and Armfield are just making their second appearance in the UFC, and yet Chase Hooper's been here for 3 years, and he's on to what, fight number 6 in the promotion? I mean, he comes in the UFC, beats Daniel Tamer, he beats him, loses to Alex Caceres, and given it was a fight that was probably too quick for Hooper, but then he beats Peter Barrett after that. He loses to Ocho Peterson, beats Colares, and probably the best fight Hooper has had to date. He looked really good in that fight, and now he'll be taking on Steve Garcia, a guy who has usually fought at lightweight. Of course, this is a fight contested at featherweight, so Garcia is going down in weight. And, you know, he comes in, he loses to Luis Pena in his first fight in 2020, then beats Charlie Ontiveros. But let's be honest with ourselves, Ontiveros is not very good, and, you know, Ontiveros had 3 fights in the UFC. He lost in the first round every single time. Actually, Garcia got to the second round, but still. And then his last fight for Garcia, he lost, got knocked out in a minute, and now he's back taking on Chase Hooper 4 months later. This is all dependent on if Steve Garcia, though, can keep this fight on the feet. Because, I mean, I wouldn't say Steve Garcia is the most impressive guy on the feet, but I think he'll get drowned on the ground. Don't get me wrong. I think he will. And on the feet, I think this fight is competitive. I think Hooper is more of a volume guy, obviously, and he's not going to try to go knock anybody out, but he's always going to be in your face, and he's always going to be throwing 1s and 2s at you and try to, you know, mix it up to the point where eventually you can go in and get a takedown. But on the feet, again, I think it's close. On the ground, I would give the advantage to Hooper. But when you look at this fight, I think there are more advantages for Chase Hooper against Steve Garcia than there are advantages for Steve Garcia over Chase Hooper. So I'm going to take Hooper to win. I think the volume and the pressure on the feet will be enough, and I think he'll mix it up on the ground, and he'll work the takedowns, and he'll give Garcia danger on the ground as well. I want to pick a finish, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to say Hooper by decision, taking the safe pick. Next up, we've got the ugly man, Joe Holmes, taking on Jun Young Park. When I first saw this fight, I thought it was kind of a mismatch, honestly, just because you've seen the fights that Parks had before, and you know Parks coming off that win over Eric Anders, and yes, he lost to Gregory Rodriguez, but the guys strung together a couple good wins in the UFC, and I just thought, you know, Joe Holmes, the guy who's 1-1 in the promotion, I think he could have used a different fight with a guy not named Jun Young Park, considering Parks, again, had 6 fights in the promotion. He's been around for a while, and for Holmes, he comes in, he wins the Contender Series against Shanti Barnes, then he goes to Fury FC, he wins on Dana White looking for a fight, then he loses to Jamie Pickett by unanimous decision, and then he comes in, he beats Alan Amadovsky by rear naked choke. Now, Alan Amadovsky, my goodness, can I speak English, is not very good. The guy is not very great. They gave him to Joe Pyfer after this, and Pyfer, of course, knocked him out in the first round, but Alan Amadovsky's a guy who went 0-4 in the UFC, and he didn't win a round. He really didn't win a minute. So Holmes goes in there, he knocks down Amadovsky immediately, he takes his back, submits him with a rear naked choke, he picks up his first win in the UFC. So good for Joe Holmes, right? And I like Joe Holmes. He's a big middleweight, he's 6'4", but now he's taking on Jun Young Park, and it's going to be a big size difference. I mean, obviously not in weight, but just with height. Holmes is 6'4", Park's 5'10". And now, I mean, Joe Holmes got a huge reach advantage too. 7-inch reach advantage for Joe Holmes in this fight. But skill-wise, I think Jun Young Park's better. I think Joe Holmes is going to have a puncher's chance. Don't get me wrong. I think Holmes has got very powerful hands. He's, boxing background out of Joe Holmes. I think he'll definitely have a puncher's chance, and I definitely think he'll be able to put, if he's got the power, he's got the potential to put Jun Young Park down. But I think skill-wise, I think Park is better than Holmes. I think he's got better striking, Power-wise, I think Holmes is better, but technically sound-wise, Jun Young Park is better. Wrestling-wise, Park is better, and we've seen fights where Park's gone in there against guys who aren't really all that great on the ground, like, you know, Tefon Chukwe, or like John Phillips, or Marc-Andre Berriot, guys who aren't the greatest on the ground. Park has weathered the storm, and the guys who are, you know, want to be on their feet, he's gone in there, taken them down, and held them down. And I think this is one of the fights where this could happen, like a Joe Holmes. If Joe Holmes is finding some success in the feet in the first round, Park's going to go to the ground game, and he's going to try to ground Joe Holmes. Holmes is not a horrible grappler. He's got 6 wins by submission in his career. Obviously, he's got the heavy hands, but he does have some submission victories. But when you got a guy like Jun Young Park putting Joe Holmes on his back, he's going to put Holmes in a lot of danger. So, obviously, I think Holmes has got a puncher's chance to sit down Park and put him out. But I don't think that's going to happen because I think Park, again, I think he's a better striker, and on the ground, I think he's a better grappler. So as long as he doesn't get hit with the bomb, Jun Young Park should win. I've got Park to win this one. I think we'll get it. I think we'll get it done by decision. I think you can definitely see, you know, something similar to what happened in the Berriot fight, the Phillips fight, even the Chukwe fight. I'm going to take Jun Young Park to win this one by unanimous decision. Guess who's back? Back again. Andre Arlovski at 43 years old is on, hold on, a 4-fight winning streak, and the man has won 6 out of his last 7 fights. Yeah, all by decision. Andre Arlovski keeps on winning, and I feel like we've been over this time and time again, but here we go. He's taking on Marcos Rodrigo de Lima. For de Lima, he's coming off that loss to Blagoy Ivanov. Blagoy Ivanov coming back after a very long layoff, and Ivanov came in there and beat de Lima by decision. It was a close fight, but I gave the slight nod to Blagoy. You give him rounds 2 and 3. You give de Lima really running away with that round 1, and that's really where de Lima is going to have his best round. He is going to try to come out there in the first round. He's going to try to knock your head off. I mean, I think a prime example of that being the Ben Rothwell fight. Now, Ben Rothwell's gone to BKFC, and he's won a fight over there, so good for him fighting in bare knuckle promotions. But for de Lima, that's probably his best win to date. He comes in there on the Holloway Rodriguez card. I believe it's a co-main event. Rothwell's coming off a couple wins. Boom! De Lima comes in there, blitzes him, knocks him out 30 seconds into the fight, and de Lima looks really good in doing so. And I think that's where he's going to have his best chance of winning this fight against Arlovski. It's going to try to be to knock off Arlovski's head early in this fight, because that's really where Arlovski's lost. I mean, he lost to Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik knocked him out in 30 seconds. Ospinel submitted him. I mean, I don't think de Lima is going to be, you know, taking down Andre Arlovski for say, but if you're going to beat Arlovski, you can't fall into his trap. You can't fall into the 15-minute striking game that Arlovski wants to play with you, because if he does that, he's likely going to win a 15-minute decision. I mean, he did that against Jake Collier. It was a close fight, but he beat Collier. Close fight against Vanderaa, but he beat him. Carlos Felipe, I didn't think was all that I didn't think it was as close as the other two, but he won. Chase Sherman wasn't really that close. Bozer was close, but Arlovski did enough. And then Felipe Lins was close, but he did enough, right? Actually, no, Lins wasn't all that close either. But again, this is the game you get into with Arlovski. If you can't knock his head off in the first round, he'll likely win a decision. And it's what Andre Arlovski has done towards the later end of his career. He's found a way to preserve himself in the promotion. He's found a way to keep on winning fights, and he isn't fighting top 15 guys. He's fighting guys outside of the top 15 that he can beat. I mean, Chase Sherman's a low-level heavyweight. Felipe's kind of a low-level heavyweight. You know Vanderea's a low-level heavyweight. Collier's kind of low-level too, I would say now, because he lost Chris Barnett. Arlovski keeps on beating these guys. And usually they'll be guys who are making their way up the ranks, but de Lima's been around for a while, and yes, he's got power. And I think he's got a puncher's chance in this fight, right? But I think if he doesn't get him out of there in the first round, I think Andre Arlovski's going to win. And I think Arlovski's going to win another decision. I think he will piece him up. Arlovski will do his thing. He won't get caught in any danger in this fight. And he'll out-technically strike de Lima in this fight, and he'll win a decision. That's my prediction on this one. I think that's how this fight goes, right? We've been on a roll picking Andre Arlovski by decision. I think I've gotten almost all of Andre Arlovski's fights right recently. I've gotten the last 4 right on the dot by unanimous decision, or not by unanimous decision, but just by decisions. He's going to beat de Lima here as long as he doesn't get knocked out in the first round. Arlovski's going to win in the fight I want next. We mentioned him earlier. I want Chris Barnett, Andre Arlovski, because I think that'd be fun. I think if Barnett wins, huge boost beating a former UFC champion, but let's be honest with ourselves, it'll likely be an Arlovski decision again. But I'm going to take Andre Arlovski to beat Rodrigo de Lima. I got him by decision. So the fact that this fight's on the prelims is a shame. I mean, it should not be on the prelims. Phil Hawes taking on Roman Dolidze. What a fight, because Dolidze is coming off that huge victory where he decimated Kyle Dawkins. finishing him in the first round, a minute and 13 seconds on that card. And I believe was it San Antonio? It was the Kattar and Emmett card. Is in Austin, Texas, excuse me. But came in there, knocked down at Dawkins twice in the span of a minute, finished him with a big knee, winning the fight, and undoubtedly his biggest win yet in the UFC, because I mean it was his first knockout since his first fight of the promotion, where he knocked out Hadias Ibrahimov, and Ibrahimov was horrible in the UFC. And then after that, Dolidze picked up a split decision victory over John Allen. He lost to Trevin Giles after that. He beat Laureano Staropoli, and prior to that Kyle Dawkins fight, Roman Dolidze was always just the dominant wrestler who's got heavy hands that really, he can't really put his combos together, but he'll throw big shots and he'll try to knock you out with that one big shot. And really, that's what he did against Kyle Dawkins too, and he closed the distance. Really, came up against him came up against Dawkins close on the fence, pause, but still closed distance, knocked him out, finished the fight that way. But that's kind of what I got out of Dolidze. And going into that Dawkins fight, I was thinking, okay, sure, he's going to try to take down Dawkins, but Dawkins is just so much better than him on the ground, and jiu-jitsu wise, Dawkins should be able to find the advantage. On the feet too, you think, okay, Dawkins is quicker, as long as he doesn't get hit with the power shot, he should be able to win. Well, that didn't go that way like we thought it was going to for Kyle Dawkins. Dolidze knocked him out. Now, when you look at Phil Hawes is coming off a really impressive performance on that same exact card at Kattar and Emmett in Austin, Texas, where he beat Deron Winn. That was a mismatch. The fight shouldn't have happened. Deron Winn is not on the level of Phil Hawes. And Hawes, again, his growth in the UFC was stunted by that Chris Curtis loss. Obviously, he was winning that fight till he got hit a couple times. Curtis eventually put him down at the end of that first round, winning the fight in his UFC debut. But other than that, Phil Hawes has been dominant so far in the UFC. He has not been taken down so far in the UFC. If he can keep the fight standing against Roman Dolidze, he's going to find a lot of success. Now, both these guys, sure, they do kind of tired towards the end of their fights. Hawes had trouble late against Nasruddin Imavov, but he ended up winning the fight, probably his biggest win to date. He beat Kyle Dawkins by unanimous decision. He beat Jacob Malkoun, knocked him out in 18 seconds. He won in the Contenders Series, lost to Marquez back in 17, but we don't have to talk about it. And he just finished Deron Winn in the second round in his fight back in June, right? Both these guys, though, aren't great deep into fights. We've seen Dolidze tire against the likes of Trevin Giles, and even to a certain extent, John Allen as well. I mean, he looked good at the beginning of that fight, but, I mean, actually, I take it back. He looked good at the end of the Allen fight, but it's definitely the Giles fight where he started to tire towards the end of that one. And the Staropoli fight, kind of the same. Dolidze didn't have the same success wrestling in that third round against Staropoli like he did early in that fight, but, I mean, man, you're going to see fireworks to start this fight, I think. I think both these guys are going to throw, but I think striking-wise, Hawes is better. Power-wise, I think they're kind of the same, because Dolidze will throw everything into each shot he throws, but I think Hawes is just all-around better on the feet. I think he's the more technical striker. I think he has more weapons than Roman Dolidze on the feet. I think Hawes has got more power on the feet as well. So I think if Dolidze is not able to take him down, which I don't anticipate being the case, I don't think he's going to be able to take down Hawes, or at least take down Hawes and hold him down on a consistent basis, because maybe he'll get him down once, but I think Hawes will be able to pop back up to his feet. So I think you're going to see a striking fight then. I think eventually Hawes will be able to finish Dolidze. I'm going to go second round knockout. I think someone's going to get knocked out, whether it be Dolidze landing a bomb early. I think that's really what favors Roman. If Roman Dolidze can hit Phil Hawes early and knock him down and win the fight that way, similar to what Chris Curtis did, I guess, in the first round. Because if not, I think, again, I'm not impressed with either of these guys' gas tanks, but I'm going to give the obvious advantage to Phil Hawes. I think Hawes can, later in this fight, can have way more success than what Dolidze can have. So as we get into the second and the third rounds, I think Hawes will be able to sit back on his punches and make Roman Dolidze a really one-sided fighter. Because if Dolidze is not able to get the takedown, he is just going to be winging big power shots, while Hawes can sit back on his punches, work his combos, and eventually put away Dolidze. So I'm going to take a late second round knockout finish for Phil Hawes. I think it'll be more of him, again, just waiting for that perfect opportunity. I think Dolidze is going to overextend, and I think Hawes is going to counter, and he's going to put him down after Dolidze, again, is stuck to just striking with Phil Hawes. So I'm going to take Hawes to win this fight. It's a really good fight for the prelims. Really excited for it, but I'm going to be taking Phil Hawes to beat Roman Dolidze. Got him to win by second round knockout. Big time fight here at light heavyweight. We have got Dustin Jacoby taking on Khalil Rountree, and for Dustin Jacoby, this man's second UFC stint has been unbelievable. I mean, the man is 6-0-1 in his second run in the UFC, and obviously look at his UFC record on the screen right now. It says 6-2-1 because his first stint in the promotion didn't go all that well, but Jacoby was so young in his career. He came into the UFC 6-0. He lost back-to-back fights, but he's rebuilt himself as a fighter. He's, of course, now a former Glory kickboxer. He comes back to the UFC, beats Ty Flores in the Contender Series, and there's been no looking back ever since, because he beats Flores, dominates him in a decision victory, a grueling fight. He knocks out, or TKOs, Justin Ledette after that with leg kicks and eventually finish him on the ground. He beats Maxime Grishin in a fight where I will continue to hammer and say that Maxime Griffin won that fight, but it's fine. He's got the draw against Ion Cutelaba after that. He beats Darren Stewart by knocking him out in the first round. He beats John Allen by decision after that. He beats Michal Zlsheshek by decision after that, and by far his most impressive win comes on that Ortega-Rodriguez card in Long Island, New York, knocking out Da Un Jung in the first round. Big right cross put him to sleep, and Dustin Jacoby has continued the winning streak, and now he's taking on a guy in Khalil Rountree Jr., and I feel like honestly Da Un Jung's a little bit higher level than Rountree is, if we're being honest with ourselves, but Rowntree's coming off that huge victory over Carl Roberson where he finished him in the second round. He's back-to-back second round finishes for Rountree. The Modestas Bukauskas win was it is that oblique kick that is so scary, but Rountree finished Modestas Bukauskas, who I believe just got booked for another fight, I think in Cage Warriors, if I'm not mistaken, but Rountree beats him. Then he finishes Carl Roberson in his last fight earlier this year, and now you're looking after, Rountree lost back-to-back fights to the likes of Marcin Prokhnja, where it looked really bad, but now he's coming off back-to-back knockout wins, and now he gets a guy like Dustin Jacoby, who's a better striker than the guys previously mentioned, obviously. I mean, Bukauskas not in the UFC anymore. Roberson has had his fair share of losses in the promotion. So Jacoby, obviously, I mean, we speak at length about how good this guy is, because also, by the way, Roberson's lost 4 in a row. So, Rowntree's beating guys, but they're not the top-level guys that Jacoby's beating. And it's not like Jacoby's beating the top-level guy, like the top-level guys. But he's beating guys who are UFC fighters and who are going to be in the UFC for a while, like Zlsheshek, like Da Un Jung, like a Maxime Griffin, right? He's beating solid guys. He's having close fights with Ion Cutelaba. If Jacoby can go in there, and again, he's a glory kickboxer for a reason. He's got really good hands, really good kicks. Jacoby should be able to beat Khalil Rountree, and I think he's going to be able to get Rountree out of there early. I think Jacoby's it's going to be an impact fight. He's going to put it. He's going to make a statement in this fight. Justin Jacoby is. I think I got Jacoby first round knockout. I mean, I wouldn't say this is a levels fight, but I just think striking-wise, Jacoby's on a different level than Khalil Rountree. I mean, we can look at the wrestling, but really, I don't think Rowntree's successfully taken anyone down in the UFC, so if anything, the grappling advantage goes to Dustin Jacoby, but I really don't think Jacoby's going to have to go down there with Rountree, because I think he's quicker than Rountree. Power-wise, maybe Rowntree's just slightly better, but I think Jacoby knows when to pick his shots better than when Rountree can pick his shots, so I like Jacoby all day here. I think, again, there's a reason he's in the top 15, and there's a reason he's been on a roll in his second run in the UFC. I like Dustin Jacoby to go in there, beat Khalil Rountree Jr. I got Jacoby to continue his winning ways by beating Rountree by first round knockout. So I don't know why this fight's so high on the card. It shouldn't be this high, but here it is. Tresean Gore, Josh Fremd. For Tresean Gore, now the problem with him coming into the UFC was that he had only had 3 pro fights, given he had 2 in the Ultimate Fighter, and he beat the likes of Ryder Newman, who he beat by unanimous decision, who Ryder Newman is now, he picked up a win in Eagle FC his next fight. He is booked to fight next month at Tough Enough 130, which is cool for him. And then Gore beat Gilbert Urbina, who Urbina went on to fight in the Ultimate Fighter finale to fight Brian Battle because Gore got hurt. Battle ended up choking him out in the second round. And now Tresean Gore gets signed to the UFC right away. He fights Battle like he was originally supposed to for the Ultimate Fighter finale championship or whatever. Battle beats him, and then he turns that into a fight 5 months later against Cody Brundage, a guy who Brundage was coming off a loss to Nick Maximov, and I mean, I was under the impression that Cody Brundage was a jiu-jitsu guy. I mean, obviously he had some striking power and he was solid on the feet, but his 2 fights previous to the Gore fight in the UFC didn't indicate that this guy was, a hard hitter or was a guy that's going to one-punch knock you out, because he didn't finish Dalcha Lujanbula on the feet. He was getting beat by Dalcha Champion on the feet, and it was, Brundage catching him in a guillotine to finish the fight that way, that won him his first fight in the UFC, and then Brundage went into the Gore fight, big overhand right, put him to sleep 3 minutes into the fight. And now Tresean Gore is fighting 3 months after getting knocked out, which is not enough time, against a guy in Josh Fremd who was on a 4-fight winning streak in the LFA, all by first round knockouts. This is a guy who fought for the LFA middleweight championship. He lost against Gregory Rodriguez, but you know how good Rodriguez is. You know that guy is very talented. He just came off that win over Chidi and Jokawani a couple weeks ago. You know how good Josh Fremd is. And he had the fight against Fluffy Hernandez. He lost, but it's going to happen to you. I mean, he got into a grappling heavy fight with Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, and Anthony Fluffy Hernandez submitted Rodolfo Vieira a couple fights ago. So, I mean, that just shows you how good Anthony Hernandez is. And Fremd had a somewhat competitive fight. He lost every single round of the fight. I mean, one judge, I think, gave him 1 round, thanks Sal D'Amato. But Fremd had a somewhat competitive fight with Hernandez. And I know it's not the same type of fight when he's going to go fight Tresean Gore. Obviously, it's not, because Gore's a striker. He's going to box with you. But, man, I don't think this fight's that competitive. Plus, another reason being, yeah, Gore just got knocked out 3 months ago by a guy in Cody Brundage who's not known for his striking. What's going to happen when he fights a guy who has knockout power, who has knocked guys out before, who has won back-to-back fights by knockout? What's going to happen to Gore? Unless Gore can find that big power shot, big overhand, and put him to sleep, which could happen. Will it happen? Probably not. But unless he can do that, I don't think he's going to be able to beat Josh Fremd. I think it's a product of maybe the Ultimate Fighter season that Tresean Gore was on being a little bit overrated, even though I do think highly of some guys on that season. I think the guys that we got, obviously in the lower weight class, I believe, 35 high stand is, right? Pretty heat stand is, I believe, or is it 45? Whatever, I think it's 35 because it wasn't Volkanovski's weight class. The 35s we got out that season were good. I think heat stand's going to be really good. I do like Ricky Turcios, even though his last fight was a dud. But the guys that we got 85, honestly, other than Battle, I don't know how good those guys really are, because Michael Gilmore was not good in the UFC. Urbina hasn't fought since. Newman is doing okay, I guess. Petrosky, I take that back. Petrosky's doing really well for himself. But anyways, yeah, I don't think this fight's competitive. I think Gore's going to get knocked out again. I think Fremd is so much better than him. I think he's going to melt him. Unless Gore can find that big power shot and put him out, Josh Fremd's going to win this fight. I don't find it all that competitive. I think it's going to be like the Brundage fight, but just quicker. Josh Fremd's going to beat Tresean Gore, and he's going to knock him out in the very first round. All right, so heavyweight matchup between Waldo Cortes-Acosta in his UFC debut, taking on Jared Vanderaa. Let's be honest with ourselves, guys. Let's make this quick. This is one-way traffic. This is the heavyweight equivalent to what the UFC did to Joe Pyfer when they gave him Alan Amedovski at 205 pounds. This is what's happening here. I mean, seriously, this is what this is. Or sorry, 185 pounds. This is what this is. Because Waldo Cortes-Acosta is a good fighter. He's a good fighter, who I think has a very bright future, who can come in there, clean guys out, knock them out, get big finishes, get on highlight reels. The UFC looked at the weight class, they looked at heavyweight, and they have got a lot, and I mean a lot, of low-level heavyweights. We can go over them in a second, but they got a lot of them. They saw it, they looked, okay, Jared Vanderaa, so you are 1-4 in the UFC, sorry, 1-5 in the UFC. You came into the UFC by beating Harry Hunsucker in the Contender Series, and oh, by the way, Harry Hunsucker is a guy who's 0-3 in the UFC, got knocked down the first round every single fight he had in the UFC. Okay. You lost to Sergey Spivak, you beat Justin Tafa, you lost to Romanov, you lost to Arlovski, you lost to Oleinik, you lost to Chase Sherman. That's the one that sticks out because, okay, you can lose a fight to Oleinik, I get it. Oleinik's good. You can lose to Arlovski. Arlovski beats a lot of guys. Romanov's really good. I know he just lost his last fight, but Romanov's still really good. And you can lose to Sergey Spivak. He's about to be in a main event coming up. Actually, no, he's about to be in a co-main event coming up against Tai Tuivasa. That's fine. But when you lose to Chase Sherman, a guy who was cut by the UFC, who they brought back just because they needed someone for Romanov to smash on a fight night, they brought him back just for that. They had to give him 2 fights. Oh no, he beats Vanderaa, and now Chase Sherman's gonna fight. In 2 weeks, Josh Parisian. I mean, my goodness, that is low-level heavyweight at its finest. But they looked at the current heavyweights in the roster. They said, Jake Collier just fought, can't fight him. Felipe suspended, he's not fighting anymore. Dontel Mays just lost, probably can't fight him. Parisian's booked. They want to get Waldo Cortes-Acosta some wins, and this is the fight to do it. Because again, I'm listing probably the lowest level heavyweights. Muhammad Usman, just won the Ultimate Fighter. Probably don't want to have 2 prospects go up against each other. Where is Jarvis Danho? I don't know where he is. I mean, literally, I think the lowest rated guy is probably is definitely Vanderaa. Vanderaa gets hit by a lot of guys. He will take a lot of damage. He got in that back and forth war with Justin Tafa, and he has not been the same since. He looked good in the Tafa fight. He hit some bombs from Justin Tafa, but he stayed in the fight, and he fought it pretty well, and he won the fight. He won Fight of the Night. Dana White loved that fight, and honestly, that is the only reason Jared Vanderaa is still in the UFC. It's because of that incredible fight against Tafa, where he's bleeding like a stuffed pig, but he still wins the fight. Cortes-Acosta is going to come in there. He's going to put it on him. I mean, his win over Danilo Stewart on the Contender Series was very impressive. This guy had a bunch of wins in LFA. He fought in Bellator. He beat Mo Derice. I think very highly of Cortes-Acosta. He's got heavy hands. He's got sharp hands. He is going to connect on Jared Vanderaa, and he's going to put him to sleep in the first round. I don't think minus 195 I don't think it does this fight justice. I think Cortes-Acosta should be an even bigger favorite. I don't think Vanderaa stands a shot because, again, I don't think Waldo Cortes-Acosta should be losing to a guy who's 1-5 in the UFC. So I'm going to take the former baseball player coming at you from the Dominican Republic. I'm taking Cortes-Acosta to beat Chase Sherman. Not Chase Sherman. Well, he would beat Chase Sherman, but take on the man who just lost to Chase Sherman and Jared the Mountain Vanderaa. I think Vanderaa, unfortunately, will be cut from the promotion from here on out, but I think Cortes-Acosta's got to do what he got to do. Pick up his first win in the UFC by knocking out Jared Vanderaa in the very first round. So this has got to be one of the tougher fights for me to pick on this card. We've got the Dirty Bird, Tim Means, back in the co-main event, taking on a Max Payne Griffin. And for Max, Griffin looked really good in the Carlos Condit fight just 2 fights ago, beating Condit in Condit's last fight by unanimous decision at UFC 264, Poirier McGregor 3. And then after that, he turned that into a fight in Columbus, Ohio against Neil Magny, a fight a lot of people thought Max Griffin won. Now, you can make the case either way. I mean, Magny went 1 for 9 in his takedown attempts in that fight, obviously winning the 3rd round. The fight comes down to the second, because the first one's won by Max Griffin. Max Payne Griffin wins that first round. He's outstriking Neil Magny. He knocks down Magny in that first round as well. Comes down to the second. It's razor thin. You can make the case either way. I mean, you look at the significant strikes in that second round. 30-26, it goes to Max Griffin, but then you got to look at damage done in that second round too. You can make the case other way, but what can't be, what can't be taken away from Max Payne Griffin out of that fight is that he is fighting really well right now. I mean, in the last 4 fights from Max Griffin has been the best Max Griffin we have seen to date. I mean, the win over Ramiz Brahimaj a couple fights ago where Brahimaj's guy's entire ear falling off is very impressive when he knocks out Song Kenan after that on the Brunson Holland card, winning a knockout of the night bonus in that fight, and then beating the legend, the former champion, the former interim champion in Carlos Condit in Condit's last fight is very impressive out of Griffin. Griffin's stand-up game has looked very good recently. He's shown the hands, he's shown the power, and the man's striking has been on point recently. But now he's going to be taking on the veteran of the game in Tim Means. The Dirty Bird is 38 years old. He's coming back, and Griffin's no spring chicken either. The guy's 36, but Means is 38 coming into this fight. This man has been in the UFC for a while. He made his UFC debut back in 2012. Obviously, he had a break in between where he went and fought in the independents or the regionals for a couple fights. But after having a couple fights in Legacy, he came back to the UFC, and he's been doing all right for himself ever since. But especially recently for Tim Means, you know you can take the loss to Kevin Holland with a grain of salt because you know how good Kevin Holland is, and Holland caught him with the Darce, but you know, Holland was doing his thing on the feet against Tim Means, eventually got him on the ground and finished him with a Darce choke, but you know, Kevin Holland's truly a top 10 guy in that weight class. But you look at the 3 fights Means had before the Kevin Holland fight. You look at the win over Nicholas Dalby, which is a good win. He outstruck Dalby. He outstrikes Mike Perry for 3 rounds in November of 2020, and he outstrikes Laureano Staropoli in their fight in August of 2020 as well. Tim Means is like very good on the feet. He can always go to the wrestling too if he needs it. He's got a pretty nice double that he can land, and what he did in the Staropoli fight, especially late in that fight when he needed to go to it, he needed to bank around because he didn't know if Means won that first round or not. He won the second with the knockdown of Staropoli, but in the third, you didn't know if that fight was either 2-0 Means or 1-1. Means goes into that third round, he puts on the wrestling shoes, and he takes down Staropoli, and he holds him down and wins the fight by decision. That's something Means can always go to, and Max Griffin's takedown defense game is pretty solid in his own right, especially when you look at the fight that he had against Magny, defending 8 takedowns against Neil Magny. Magny went 1 for 9. You know, that's impressive stuff out of Max Griffin. Obviously, in the third round, what we talked about with Means about how he took down Staropoli in the third, well, the same thing happened to Max Griffin against Neil Magny. Magny landed 1 takedown. It was in the third round, and it was dominant control time out of Magny in that third round, similar to what Means brought to Staropoli in their fight a couple years ago. But, you know, I'm just saying, it's something that can come out of Tim Means. If he has to switch it up, he can go to the ground. But I've been just so impressed with the stand-up game recently of Max Griffin. Max Griffin's stand-up game has been ever so impressive as of late. I mean, he's finding a lot of success against Neil Magny. Condit, he's finding some success. He knocks out Song Kenan. He, you know, splits open Brahimaj's ear. The guy has looked really good recently on the feet, and I usually do take Tim Means, but here I'm gonna take Max Payne Griffin. I know Griffin is the favorite going into this one, but I would think Means should be the favorite. But anyways, I'm gonna be taking Griffin. I think Griffin's stand-up game has impressed me a lot recently. He's shown a lot of signs of improvement, and if he can box up Tim Means, I think Griffin's able to win this fight. I think he gets it done by decision. I think it's going to be a back and forth fight on the feet. I think Means will have his moments, and I would get concerned, especially if this fight does go into the third round and it's 1-1 and Means goes to the wrestling in the third, and he's trying to take, and he does land that 1 takedown against Griffin, and he holds him down throughout the entirety of that third, and that's how Means can win. But I'm going to bank on Max Payne Griffin. limiting the game of the Dirty Bird here, and I think he'll be able to outstrike Means and beat him by decision. I think Max Griffin's going to win the first 2 rounds, so the third round doesn't really matter. I'm going to go Griffin winning this fight 29-28 by unanimous decision, getting back in the win column after he may or may not have been robbed against Neil Magny. I wouldn't call it a robbery, but I think he should have been looked at for a decision, similar to what I guess Sugar Sean and Piotr Jan was a couple of nights, or just last night. You know, I wouldn't say it was a robbery, but I didn't think O'Malley won. But I'm going to take... I'm taking Max Griffin to go beat Tim Means. I've got him to win this fight by decision, if I can speak English, my goodness. But yeah, we're going Griffin by decision. All right, main event time, and it is a banger. Calvin Kattar taking on Arnold Allen. My goodness, what a fight. This is a tremendous fight, because Arnold Allen, undefeated so far in the UFC. The man looked really good in the Dan Hooker fight, and I think that's been the thing that people have kind of slighted Arnold Allen on so far in his UFC run, is that the man doesn't get finishes. I mean, he had the finish over Mads Burnell as a fight that he was losing until he was winning, until he found the submission and choked out Burnell with 2 minutes to go in the fight. But it was just that, all right, Allen wins fights, he looks good, he can get knockdowns, you know, he'll work the wrestling some, and he'll outbox his opponents, but he doesn't go out and get finishes. Well, he did that against Dan Hooker, and he got rocked in his own right. Hooker landed a bomb and kind of wobbled Allen, but Allen stayed going forward. He kept his composure. He eventually connected on Hooker, sat him down, won the fight, the biggest fight yet in his career in London. He beat Dan Hooker, and now here he is in a main event spot against Calvin Kattar. And Calvin Kattar is truly in that elite tier of this weight class. He is. Calvin Kattar's a monster, and Calvin Kattar should have beat Josh Emmett. That decision, I still don't understand. Calvin Kattar beats Emmett in that fight. First round, you give to Calvin Kattar. Second round, okay, I'll give to Josh Emmett. Third round, I'll give to Josh Emmett. Fourth and fifth, no doubt about it, Calvin Kattar. It comes down to the first round, and when you watch that fight and you look at what's done in the first round, Calvin Kattar fights off a Josh Emmett takedown. Calvin Kattar outstrikes Josh Emmett. He wins that first. I'll make the case Calvin Kattar wins the second round too. The only round I am confident in saying Josh Emmett wins is the third. 4 and 5, no matter what, I don't care what you say, 4 and 5 are all Calvin Kattar. Calvin Kattar should have won that fight 48-47, maybe 49-46. And now Josh Emmett's probably going to be in a title eliminator against Yair Rodriguez, I would think, in a Fight Night main event, maybe in Mexico, but I would anticipate that's coming up next year. The winner fights Volkanovski for the belt. That should have been Calvin Kattar against Yair Rodriguez. Now it will likely be Rodriguez versus Emmett. But that's, decision didn't go his way. But Calvin Kattar is such a talented striker. You look at the win and the domination over Giga Chikadze. No one does that to Giga Chikadze. I mean, it is 5 rounds of domination for Calvin Kattar, and Chikadze had not lost in the UFC till that point. Giga Chikadze goes in there in a 5-round main event and knocks out Edson Barbosa. What does he do after? He turns around to Calvin Kattar in a 5-round main event, and Calvin Kattar beats the brakes off him for 25 minutes. 50-44, all Calvin Kattar. Wins every single round, knocks down Giga Chikadze, takes down Giga Chikadze, shows he's got the total package, and that's coming off a fight where he got dominated and maybe probably the most one-sided beatdown in UFC history against Max Holloway. But Calvin Kattar showed he can come back, and he showed so many more improvements in 2022 after that one fight in 2021 where, of course, again, he got 50-42'd. It's fine, he's back, and now he's taking on Arnold Allen, and Calvin Kattar's going to make this a stand-up fight. I mean, Allen will look to his wrestling more than what Kattar will do, and that's something that I have to bring up, but I don't think Kattar's going to engage in the takedown game. Obviously, I don't think he's going to engage in the wrestling, but if Arnold Allen tries to engage the wrestling with Calvin Kattar, I don't think he's going to be able to take him down. I just don't think that's going to be able to happen, because the only guy that's taken down Calvin Kattar so far in the UFC is Zabit Magomedsharipov, and you know how good Zabit is, and Zabit only had Calvin Kattar down for 40 seconds, right? So, and again, I'll make the case in that fight. I've talked about it before. Calvin wins that third round. That's a 5-round main event. Calvin Kattar likely beats Zabit Magomedsharipov in Russia. He probably does. He probably wins 4 and 5. And that was something we kind of always, threw at Zabit, is that Zabit never was in a 5-round atmosphere. He never got to, even in that main event, he only got a 3-round fight, and if that fight went 5, Calvin likely would have won, and Kattar would have reached the potential that maybe Zabit should have had. But of course, Zabit's retired. He'll never fight again. We'll never get to see a 5-round Zabit Magomedsharipov, and it sucks. But I'm just saying, Calvin Kattar probably would have won that fight if that fight was scheduled for 5 rounds. Kattar comes back, he elbows Jeremy Stephens, he knocks him out, he beats Dan Ige in a 5-round main event. The guy is good, he is talented. Can he beat Arnold Allen, though? because Allen's got good striking. Allen's got solid straights. He will put damage into guys. He knocked down Sodiq Yusuff. He can go to the wrestling too when he needs it, but again, I don't think Allen will be able to go to that in this fight, so I think we are going to see purely a boxing fight between Kattar and Allen. Is this too much too soon for Arnold Allen? Is it, I mean, right? Because Calvin Kattar's been there with the best of the best. He has been in there with the best guys in the weight class. I mean, Max Holloway is truly the number 2 at 145, and Calvin Kattar has gone 5 rounds with him, and he has stayed in the fight. I don't think Allen's going to be able to finish Kattar. It's just, can he put damage on Calvin Kattar, and can he win a 5-round decision against him? Something that very talented strikers have not been able to do. Giga Chikadze is a very talented striker, and Calvin Kattar weathered the storm and put it on Giga for 5 rounds, right? Dan Ige, he put it on Dan Ige. You look at the faces of the guys Calvin Kattar's fighting at the end of the fight. Even Josh Emmett. Look at Josh Emmett's face at the end of that fight. Look at Giga's face. Look at Ige's face. Look at Jeremy Stevens' face after Calvin Kattar knocks him out. Look at Shane Burgos after he finishes him back in Boston in 2020. Or 2020. Sorry, UFC 220. This is 2 o'clock. I'm recording this at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm tired now. But after what he did Shane Burgos back at UFC 220 in 2018, Calvin Kattar's good on the feet. He's got power, but he's the volume, and Kattar is always active on the feet. He's always throwing something, and he's usually always landing. Can I say the same out of Arnold Allen? No, I can't, because Allen's going to pick his shots more than what he will do against Kattar. That's why the Hooker fight was such a rare, it was just, that was a rarity, but it was just interesting to me because that's not what we've seen out of Arnold Allen, at least as of late, and really ever in the UFC. He usually takes his time, he'll counter more, he'll wait, he'll sit back on his shots. No, in the Dan Hooker fight, he went for it. He was like, nah, I'm home country, I'm in England, I'm going for it, I'm gonna try to put this man down, and he did. He got caught, and if he approaches the Calvin Kattar fight like he did against Dan Hooker, especially early in the Hooker fight, Kattar's gonna rock him, and it's gonna be different, because Kattar's not going to open up like Dan Hooker opened up after Dan Hooker hurt Arnold Allen, and he's not fighting a guy in Calvin Kattar who's really draining himself to get down to 145 pounds like Dan Hooker is, right? The knockout's not going to come as easy against Calvin Kattar like it did against Dan Hooker. Kattar's got a chin. I've seen Calvin Kattar go in there, eat 500 significant strikes from Max Holloway, and stay in the fight, and still throw shots back at him 24 minutes into the fight. Is this too much too soon for Arnold Allen? And are there levels to this game still? And is Calvin Kattar, ranked number 5, still on a different level than what number 6 Arnold Allen is? I think he is. Calvin Kattar is just too good for Arnold Allen, at least at this point of Allen's career. Allen has not lost in the UFC just yet, but Calvin Kattar will be his first loss, because Calvin Kattar is going to win a 5-round decision against Arnold Allen if he doesn't finish him. That's how good Calvin Kattar is. Calvin Kattar should be in a title eliminator right now. He should be. He's not. And now he's going to have to go in there and he has to fight a killer that nobody wants to fight, who is undefeated in the promotion in Allen. But Kattar's going to come in here and he's going to outbox Arnold Allen for 5 rounds. He's going to come in here and this is going to be a statement performance like what he did against Giga Chikadze. I don't think he's going to win 5-0. I think he'll win 4-1. I think Allen will get like the 2nd round. But I think Kattar's going to win. Arnold Allen has not been in the 5-round environment Calvin Kattar's been in time and in time out. Kattar's going to drown him, and Calvin Kattar's going to outbox Arnold Allen to a 4-1 unanimous decision victory. Calvin Kattar picks up the win in a much-needed fight for him. I am a little bit concerned because it's only 4 months after the Emmett fight, which was a war. It was a 5-round war that Kattar did take some damage in, but I think it should be fine. Allen fought all the way back in, March? Obviously, that was 7 months ago. I think Kattar, though, bounces back. He picks up the win, gets back on that track to the title shot that he should honestly be only a fight away from, and he'll beat Arnold Allen in a fight that he is the favorite in. Calvin Kattar is going to beat Allen. He's going to get it done by unanimous decision, giving Allen his first loss in the UFC. So, folks, that will do it for our fight night predictions here with Calvin Kattar and Arnold Allen in the main event. Actually, real quick before we go, we will look at matchmaking for our guy in Calvin Kattar. Again, as we look, you don't want to give him Max Holloway. Obviously, I think Holloway will probably look to go to 55, at least I think. I don't know. Maybe he'll stick around, but you can't do Kattar Holloway again. I think the reasonable matchup here is Calvin Kattar, Brian Ortega. We'll see if Ortega is ready to fight soon, but I think that should be the next reasonable step for Calvin Kattar. And then if he gets through Brian Ortega, then boom, title shot. If Ortega's not ready, you could look at the loser of Rodriguez-Emmett, but if Emmett loses, you're not going to want to do that fight again. You can't go down in the rankings. He's not going to fight a guy like Bryce Mitchell or Movsar Evloev or even a Sodiq Yusuff to that extent. The only other guy is not Giga Chikadze. He's already beat Chikadze. The only other guy is Korean Zombie. And that's really only if Kattar wants it, because it's a fight that Kattar will likely win. It would likely entail Calvin Kattar going to South Korea, fighting Chan Sung Jung in the Zombies' last fight, which could happen, but I think the UFC will likely look to an Edson Barbosa or an Alex Caceres for Chan Sung Jung's last fight. Just, again, because Zombie's been a promotional guy that the UFC will likely want to go out on a win, especially in Korea, drive the Korean market. So I don't think that'll be next for Kattar, but that's a big opportunity, because I think, again, he could probably go in there and beat Chan Sung Jung in his own backyard, but I think the likely next fight for Kattar, and even the winner of the fight, even if Allen wins, the likely next fight, and the only guy that makes sense, is Brian Ortega next. Again, hopefully Ortega is ready to fight soon after the dislocated shoulder injury when he lost to Yair Rodriguez, but I think that likely is next for Kattar with the win. After he beats Allen, I think he moves on to T-City, Brian Ortega. And folks, again, thank y'all for watching. Make sure that subscribe button down below for more. Make sure you leave a like. If you did enjoy the video, make sure that subscribe button down below for more, as we'll be back next week for Amanda Lemos and Marina Rodriguez. Again, folks, thank you for watching, and Mamba forever.